Warning. This podcast is about to open the sealed section of spirituality.
Hey you, yeah you, we see you, you divine human being.
And we are calling you to come home.
We are ready to talk about the real shit. We're going to get real about life as a divine human being.
The good, the not so great, spirituality and taboo. Divinely Human is the podcast that's all about what it means to be human in a spiritual context.
We know it's not just about being spiritual, it's about being human too.
And that means changing poopy nappies and channeling angels.
Sometimes even at the same time. It's time for us to stop making other people's noise our own soundtrack of life.
Let's make some waves together so that we can all ride them together and create deep resonance, a sense of home in this crazy world.
Pour yourself a coffee
Or a glass of wine if that's your potion.
and sit down with your new favorite spiritual sisters
As we go on a journey together into what it means to be
a divine human being.
on this spiritual journey. Hi, and welcome to the Divinely Human podcast. I am your co-host, Alicia,
And I am Tanita.
and we are gearing up for a very juicy conversation today. This was actually something that has been, put forward by you, Tanita. And
yes.
when you mentioned it to me, we were both just like, fucking yes. This is, I guess, also something that's been subconsciously on both of our minds after a certain event, and it's kind of got us thinking. But I want to leave you to do the intro for that, because I feel like how you put it across to me was just like hit the nail on the head. So carry on.
Yay, I'm excited to talk about this. And I was like, oh, there's always that voice in the back of my mind. It's like, is she going to want to talk about this today? Because we all know what Alicia is thinking. She has zero filter when it comes to speaking her truth. And I love that. But my little sensitive Pisces soul, hungover Pisces soul was like, I can't take rejection today. So
I always want to speak about what you want to speak about. Come on. Because we're so linked up at the same time. I'm like, bro, this is honestly what I was thinking about this morning.
I know. Well, it's no surprise because on the weekend I went and saw Florence and the Machine, and not that far past in time, you saw her actually, because she was in Sydney first and then she came up to Queensland. Yeah, so it was really cool because I didn't actually know you were going to go see her, and we didn't talk about it at all. And it was really magical, the fact that we both went and saw her, and it was just divine the whole way that it was orchestrated in my own life. And so when I saw her, I have never seen her live before, but she really just inspired this topic around talent and devotion to the craft. And if you've ever seen a band play live or you've been at a concert, you know that you kind of just leave with this like inspired feeling and this just awakened sense to seeing somebody who is so incredibly devoted to what they're doing and the creation that they're outputting into the world. And it really ticked my mind over a little bit about our own industry or our own space in this world. And I consider myself a creator, but I really have been missing that passion and devotion that I saw on stage by Florence. And I've noticed it not just in myself, but by a lot of other creators too. And it's just, I don't know, it's a really fascinating topic to talk about. But I want to hear about your experience with Florence, because she, to me, represents somebody who is just so invested in creating from soul and creating from spirit and creating from love, and it's just such a beautiful frequency to be around.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember listening to her music literally when it would have been like the start of my high school years, and I just remember being like enamored by her presence, even through just listening. Like, not even looking, not even witnessing her, just listening without any visuals. And I wanted to watch her live for so long, and that finally obviously happened last week. And I wasn't even prepared for like the presence that she held. And I thought
No
it
way.
was, isn't it just wild? Like just the presence that she doesn't even, I want to say almost like she almost commands it in a way when she enters the room. It's like such a
Yeah, but not in
commanding,
a domineering way, right? It's just
no,
in such a magnetic way.
magnetic and still like very feminine. It's not aggressive. It's like this
Yeah.
feminine, flowy, but as well, kind of like, I guess going back to what we were
Powerful.
talking, powerful, which is what we were, speaking about the week before last on the podcast about the different energy and, the scapes of that. And I think that's the perfect example of what that is, right? Like just so powerful. And I found it really, really interesting. I guess this is my own little theory, but on like her performance stage, it almost looked like she had an altar set up there.
Yes, I saw that.
So beautiful. And for me, how I interpreted that was like she was setting her environment, she was setting her space, she was creating this sacred space. And it was a beautiful example of how you can still do that in front of, I don't even know how many tens of thousands of people were there, but setting this sacred space to work in, to wield her energy, to command with so much strength and power, but integrity, like the attention of those who have come to witness her. And I was just like, I think half the time I forgot to actually have a good time because I was just like,
Mesmerized. I know. I know, literally same. It was beautiful. And I loved how she was so real and down to earth. Like, I don't know if she wore shoes when she performed for you,
No.
but it was just it was beautiful to just watch her come into something that is obviously so saturated. I mean, you think about all of the other artists and singers out there, there's so many, but there's something about the way that she does things that kind of cuts through the noise, but it's so authentic. And it really inspired me because I could find myself getting so caught up in like, well, it's saturated in this particular market. Like, how do I even know how to be my authentic self? Like, truly, how can I stand out from the crowd and not, wane away from who I truly know myself to be? And it was inspiring to see somebody like her kind of do that in a way that felt really good and caused such a deep ripple. And it kind of just got me thinking, like, I just think we can't ignore those little whispers, right? Like, my whole life I've been so connected to writing, but it's something that I've let go of because of all of the advice around, well, video content is king, like, all of these different things. And I think that when you let somebody else's advice take over from that internal whisper of truth, it can really just it has caused so much doubt and lack of movement and progression in my own just like expansion of my craft. But it's still really tricky to navigate because she's somebody who doesn't drink, like she doesn't wear shoes on stage, she does things her own way, and I can imagine it takes a lot of courage to do that,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, just listening to what you were saying just then, I was just thinking, I really do resonate with what you're saying. It's like that we know what our true like calling is and what our soul wants to be doing to make us feel good. But then we feel the pressure of like what we feel like we should be doing or what society thinks we should be doing, or we're saturated in an industry where everyone's kind of like going with the flow, going with the stream this way. And you're pulled so hard into that current that when you just throw your hands up in the air and go, okay, I'm just going to do whatever, is expected of me or whatever's easiest or whatever everyone else is doing, instead of going with the flow, it actually just derails the whole fucking train. Like, and then you're like, oh, well, I'm just at a standstill now because I haven't followed what really does light me up, what I feel called to do and share, and why I'm here. And it is like such a big pause period that happens after that when you don't honor that. And it's honestly a lesson that I'm still learning myself, is to just go with your own flow, like do what you feel called to do, you know. And not just that, but also what we were speaking about just before we started recording, but also devoting yourself to that, actually devoting every living, breathing cell in your body to your craft and what you are called to do here. Like, you know, I think of it almost as like we have this genetic coding within us, and we're kind of like, I don't want to say fated, but our higher self is kind of genetically coded to have these beautiful ways of expressing in this lifetime. And as soon as we kind of veer out away from that, we don't feel like ourselves, and we feel really confused, really stagnant, really frustrated. And honestly, it just makes me feel so depressed when I dishonor myself like that. So I guess to see somebody like Florence Welsh just devote herself to who she is and expressing that, regardless of what the rest of the industry is doing, is so inspiring.
Yes, I totally agree. I totally agree with you. And I think to some point, I know a lot of people don't like to believe in fate and like to believe that, you know, it was written before you even had a choice. I do believe that we come in with codes as well. And while they are designed to really attract us to our higher path, we still can override them. And with our willpower, with our freedom of choice. But I agree. I think this journey of life and coming into this space of like wanting to create and wanting to devote myself and wanting to kind of be able to share myself on that other level, it does take this kind of cycles and seasons of stepping out and stepping back in and stepping out and stepping in. And I think it was just really powerful because this weekend I've had so many comments like, you've changed, like you've not just changed your appearance, but you've changed internally. And it's like, it's hard to, I don't know, like create from that same space because you are constantly changing and evolving. But I think when you devote yourself, you leave that room for expansion. And I think that's a worry that crosses a lot of people's minds. Like, will I get bored? Will this just feel like systematic? Will it not feel ritualistic? Is it just going to become this like breathing that happens? And for me, I chase the excitement. I've got so much fire in my chart. So I'm curious to hear about your perspective on this around like the worry that it's going to become boring or the worry that it's just going to become mundane. Do you think that when you devote yourself truly to your craft, that it can become mundane?
I think that if this might be controversial, but I feel like if you feel like you are devoting yourself to your craft and it feels boring or it feels mundane, then there's still something you haven't discovered there that you need to be sharing or expressing. There's still something in that realm that's calling out to you, because I want to look at that, you know, that ping of boredness or that ping of like, oh, as something that's actually whispering to you to find it. It's like, come find me because you're here and I'm just here. I'm so close. So that's how I kind of view that. I think that if you are feeling really fucking bored and that you're not feeling fulfilled, but you still feel like you are in your craft, I think that is the time when you go back to the drawing board and you lay it all out and you're like, okay, how else can I bring through self-expression in this? Like, what else is there to explore in this realm that lights me up? I think it's more of an invitation rather than a thing that's like, oh, run away or change what you're doing or go and do a completely different thing. I think it's more or less an invitation to just go deeper, to do a little bit more exploration and ask yourself some really important questions about what you are doing and why you're doing it too. I think your values as well are really important when it comes to making sure that you really are following that call.
Yes. Oh my God, totally. And I think that if you are a soul who does really enjoy personal development, there is no doubt that you're constantly shifting and evolving and expanding. And so we do have to kind of rearrange things externally or with our craft to be able to match, the reconstructed inside that we've been working on. So yeah, I would tend to agree, definitely. But there's always that human voice that comes through, and it's like, there's also this really sad part of me that, like, every time I see somebody who's so incredibly talented, this is like my Pisces sensitive soul, there's all of this reminder that, like, all of the souls who gave up on themselves, and that literally makes me cry, because there have been many times in my life and many times in my peers' life, my family's life, my friends' life, where I've seen us all give up on ourselves, and it's so fucking sad. Like, I just don't want that to happen to anybody,
Oh, you're such a Pisces.
I know, I'm like,
you're such a Pisces. And then I'm over here like,
fuck that.
I'm over here like, well, get the fuck up and do something, okay?
And this is why we're friends, because I would literally just sit in a ball in the corner if you were like, get up and do something.
Plus my Cap ascendant as well, like, teamed in with that. I'm like, do the fucking work.
I love that.
I forget if we looked that up. What were we looking up in her chart the other day? Of course we went and saw someone, and then we're both like onto her chart the very next looking it up. But yes. I'm not sure whether we looked at, was it you that looked at where her talent was? I knew we were looking at a whole different other asteroids. But we were looking at,
you did.
I can't even remember. But a really good indication of how you can sort of bring through your craft is asteroid talent, right? And looking that up on your chart is a huge indicator for like how you can bring that through, how you can work with it. Because I mean, it's all well and good to just be like, oh, you got to find what you're good at and then just do it. Like, do whatever you feel called to do. But it's like, how? Like, how am I going to bring this through? How am I actually going to, like, physically do this? Because a lot of the time in the spiritual realm, we're just told to do stuff or to just execute things. And it's really difficult to know how to do that or what the fuck to work with. So seeing where that is in your chart is a really good indicator. I was looking at mine the other day. Mine's in Aquarius.
Is it?
Yeah, and like conjunct my moon as well. So
that's amazing.
For me, for example, like that, I don't know, I read that as really just allowing my like concept of freedom, just allowing the concept of just not, like actually going against the grain, like being okay to go against the grain, because I always feel this pressure, especially with being a Virgo sun, to be like the good girl, right?
Yeah.
To be that person that follows the rules, that goes with the flow. And then I have this talent asteroid sitting in Aquarius conjunct my moon, and it's like, girl, use your intuitive abilities to just do the exact opposite of going with the flow.
Yeah, literally.
I'm interested to know where yours is.
That's really cool. But see, I feel like you express that so well. And I think that the talent asteroid is one for me, like, you really have to learn how to embody it, right? Like, you have to really learn how to work with that energy. That's what I've found anyway.
I think that it's been a really long journey. I think that I've only just learned how to do that probably during my Saturn return, I think, is when I really learned how to bring through that side of myself. And also, to be honest, like when we both started looking into like Black Moon Lilith and working with that energy, I think that really helped that.
Yeah, oh my God, of course it would have, because it's a very similar type of energy, one that wants you to really kind of open yourself up in a different way. I love that. Yeah. Mine's actually right on the cusp of my second and third house in Capricorn. So yeah, which is interesting because I have a Mercury in Pisces, but then my third house is like Capricorn energy. So while I actually do struggle sometimes to like communicate what I'm really feeling or in a way that I feel is going to land, I can really tend to overthink things. Yeah. And I actually have a really poor memory as well. So with talent, like literally the worst. So with talent there, I'm like, part of me really does want to work on the way that I communicate and what I value about my communication and how I can express myself. And I think that's why creation is so important, because it's just another way for me to express myself. But little tangent. After we saw Florence, I jumped on Hayley's Instagram, and she was popping up. Well, we'll tag her for anybody who's like, who is Hayley? This is our asteroid teacher, basically. And she popped up all of those asteroids about Singer, and I literally have that harmony in the 10th house. And I was like, this is crazy. Wow. Did you see that post?
I did see it. I didn't look up on my chart though where it is.
I was like, this is crazy.
So that resonates for you.
Yeah, I feel like it's something that I'm not comfortable with because my North Node's there too, but it's something that I do want to...
You're here to master that.
Yeah, exactly. But this is why I love astrology, because it can really help you with understanding your craft, right?
Yeah, and I love that you started this by expressing that you've writing and bringing through that is something that you feel is part of your craft. And then you do have talent sitting there on the cusp of your second and third house, which is like communication, but also mind and intellect. And then in Capricorn is like really, it's like something quite physical, like in the physical realm. It's like writing, putting pen to fucking paper.
Yes, that's so true. I literally never thought about it like that.
Yeah,
it's like that physical element. That makes total fucking sense.
I honestly have goosebumps. I'm just like, what the fuck?
And this is why we get readings from other people, because when you look at your own stuff or you do divination for yourself, I don't know about you, but like sometimes it's hard to connect the dots for yourself. I am so fucking good at seeing it for other people, but when it comes to me, I'm like a mute.
Even myself. And I think the reason why is because subconsciously we always have our ego that comes in to try to protect us from growth, because growth is scary, blah, blah, blah. It's not a bad thing, but it's just not helpful. So when we are reading for ourselves, I'm the same. When I look at my own chart, I'm like, I don't know. Because we try to subconsciously block our growth. We don't want to see the answers. We don't want to see the path forward. We don't even want to connect the fucking dots. We just don't, because that's so scary. But when other people do it, it's like, it's so enlightening. It's like seeing it through fresh eyes. So oh my God, I advocate that so much. I'm like, always get someone else to put their spin on it, because you're going to learn so much, because you're not going to have that ego there trying to block you from actually coming to any sort of self-realization. And
he's like, no, you must stay right here. Yes. Oh, honestly, that makes sense, right? I see that all the time. And it's really important though, I think, to see yourself through the eyes of others, because it can really help you miss the parts of us that maybe we don't catch in the reflection of our own eyes. So
yeah,
I love that.
Yeah. And I think too, going back to the idea of like devoting yourself to your craft or your art or whatever you want to call it, I think that also other people a lot of the time see that before you even see it, because they'll see you doing something in a particular way or expressing yourself in some way, and the resonance is just there, right? Like it's so loud it can't even be mistaken. It's like, that is what you're here to do, that's what you're here to share, like whether that be something you're physically doing and sharing, or whether that's a certain topic that you're speaking about or something you're putting out to the world. I think a lot of the time the feedback we get off the people who are there witnessing us, right, is truth. That is the truth. They're shining a light, shining a torch on the truth, right? Because energy doesn't lie, resonance does not lie. So when we get that response, that's the way, right?
Yes, 100%. Yep. I think if you can, it's so important to practice that vulnerability with your community, and that's what's really helped me. And I know that, like Leisha, you always say this, like, I'm so vulnerable. That's just something that I've kind of learned, but it does take a little bit of courage sometimes to show that part of yourself. But I really invite anybody who's listening who maybe isn't consciously aware of their craft or hasn't felt that spark of inspiration for a really long time, just if you're not even vulnerable with, people around you, just be vulnerable with yourself and really be that curious, inquisitive inner child to say, like, what does excite me? What have I felt that calling towards? And you can really start to see the evidence of your own life showing you and whispering you and just like calling you towards either a pattern or a theme or, a topic. It's always something. I'm curious, like, what you feel like your craft is at this moment, because for me, it's like communicating, but I want to know what it is for you.
I think for me, it is speaking. Which is something that I'm also like, I've always hated it.
Really?
I remember being in school, and whenever we had a speech that we had to do, I would have the worst anxiety. I would have a panic attack the morning of. I just couldn't do it. I would take the day off school. I would do everything that I could to not speak in front of people, not be seen. So for me, I think that it is, because whenever I do speak, heart to heart, and I put myself in that vulnerability of really just expressing myself through word, physically, like audibly, I get the resonance of the people around me. They're like, oh my God, it hits. And it's funny too, because I also have my Chiron in Leo, which is like that constant wounding around being seen, right? Leo, the illuminated Leo. It's like, oh, I can't be that. I don't want to be that. I don't want to be center of attention. I don't want to be heard or seen. And that's one of my biggest lessons here to do. But when I do have those little windows of courage that I do really step into her, that is, I can't even express how that feels. It feels just like freedom to me. Just to be able to speak without fear.
I find that so fascinating, because we're polar opposites with that. Like, during high school, that's where I would thrive. I used to absolutely froth getting up and talking in front of people. Like, I loved it. And I was always the person who would have all my English assignments done before the due date.
I would have been in the back like, that fucking bitch.
We would have hated each other.
Bloody overachiever.
So literally, but only with English. I was like, always skipped sports class, always skipped fucking sports carnivals. I was like, I am sick. So I think that's so funny, because there's so many different ways that you can reflect and really see those patterns through your life. And there's so many different ways to express that too. Like for both of us, it really does come down to communicating, but the way that you want to communicate is so different and can be so kind of, I don't know, like differently aligned and expressed through you. And I think astrology can really help with this, but also that imperfect action can really help with that too, and kind of testing the boundaries and seeing what feels good, because you don't know until you try. But like you were saying before, I'm getting major deja vu too, by the way. But like what you were saying before, you know, you have to find that balance between just doing for the sake of doing and doing because, you know, it's part of your devotion. So this has been really fun to talk about. I'm so glad it came through this morning.
Yeah, it has been a really good conversation and such a beautiful, I guess, segue from last week about, you know, talking about business and all of those things. I think that this aspect of business in itself, in this space particularly, is so important to identify and to really draw out what your craft is so that you can just resonate with people and help people, because we are our best healers when we are devoting ourselves to our craft with authenticity, with integrity, with everything we have. I think once we stray out of that, then we kind of, the lines get a bit blurred and we're just like, people are seeing us, but they're not really witnessing us in our, I don't know, ability, in our craft, in our devotion. I think it's really important. So a beautiful follow-on from last week.
Yes, I agree. Well, thank you guys for tuning into another episode. If you feel like this would help, support, inspire somebody that you know, we would deeply appreciate you sharing this episode, past episodes, even, you know, sharing our content. It really all helps. It's just Leash and I who keep this podcast going, and we appreciate any support we can because this is part of our devotion, right? We are not doing this for money. We are not doing this for any other reason than the fact that we love you guys. We want to express ourselves, and we know that when we are resonating at our highest capacity, that really can influence and impact others to do the same. So we love you guys, and we will see you next week.